All right, Evening Standard goes, globetrotting Gordon heads off to save the world again. And it goes, Gordon Brown kicked off a globetrotting tour ahead of the G20 summit today amid a stark warning from his own party that he risked ignoring the concerns of voters at home. This was days back, but then Telegraph.co.uk goes, G20 summit, Gordon Brown faces balancing act to keep world leaders happy. Prime Minister Gordon Brown faces a difficult balancing act at the G20 summit in London. BBC, G20 must act on economy. Brown, G20, can we really expect a global New Deal offered by Gordon Brown? And, of course, AFP, Brown sets off global tour ahead of G20 summit. By global tour, mean South America and Europe, and, of course, back to U.S., and Washington Post goes, here, there, and everywhere, Brown urges economic consensus. But what is on top of Brown's mind and Marco Pietropoli? Is it election 2010?
Of course. This idea that the politicians will do necessarily what is right or what is in the best interest of the electorate is not true. He's focusing on getting re-elected, and he's in danger of looking extremely silly at the G20 meeting. He spent the last 3-4 weeks jetting around the world, telling everybody that what we need is more fiscal stimulus, and then well, really, we can't afford it. And then the Governor Bank of England came out last week and told the world that we definitely can't afford it. And then the next day, the government tries to sell some fixed interest gilts, and that fails, and had to come back the following day and sell them on a variable rate. So after all this jetting around, trying to get countries to spend more to get us out of this trouble, the main advocates of this, as in Gordon Brown, his hands really are tied in how much that we can do.
All right, perhaps Gordon Brown Tyson has some, cold water to dash on your optimism here. He's been around the world. He's met a lot of leaders. And here's what Telegraph.co.uk says. Gordon Brown embarrassed by Chile president on economy. The episode was the latest difficulty to beset Mr. Brown's tour ahead of next week's G27 in London, which was on its fourth and final leg. A keynote speech to the European Parliament in Strasbourg on Tuesday was overshadowed by a suggestion from Bank of England Governor that the UK may not be able to afford a further fiscal stimulus itself. And then Mr. Brown arrived in New York. Czech Prime Minister, laid into Barack Obama's fiscal stimulus package and financial bailout plans as, quote, the way to hell. And then the Washington Post had this title, Czech leader, U.S. recovery plan is way to hell. And then, again, back to Telegraph. In Brazil yesterday, Mr. Brown's call for a $100 billion package to help revive international trade was upstaged when his host president, Da Silva, launched an excoriating attack on the blue-eyed people who had caused the economic crisis. So, Tyson, it's rifts and rifts everywhere. Rifts between the U.S. and Europe, rifts between the Europeans themselves. Then China is out there, Latin Americans, the Persian Gulf states, so it's rifts almost everywhere. So how could we, anyhow, downplay these rifts?
Well, I think you're always going to see a lot of contention when times are tough. People are upset. Politicians are struggling with a very unhappy electorate all over the world. But I think that these world leaders understand at the end of the day that they all have to do a certain amount of posturing to send whatever domestic signals to their electorates. But they all understand at the end of the day that the global economy is interconnected and that all these countries' fates, the United States, China, the Gulf states, Europe, their fates are all linked together. So where goes one region or one country, all the rest will follow. And so there is going to be a desire at these meetings to come to some broad agreement because we have to. We have to reform the global financial markets. It's clear that the recent era of deregulation over the financial sector created enormous problems. We deferred too much to very powerful investment banks. And as Bill Clinton said, the era of big government was over, and Bill Clinton was wrong. We're going to see a resurgence of government intervention in the marketplace and a restoration of government regulations.
But, Tyson, let me ask you this. Since November 15th of 2008, when we had this meeting in Washington, of course, that was overshadowed by U.S. presidential elections, we've had tens of meetings, different parts of this world, like I said, Latin America, inside the U.S. itself, in Europe, elsewhere in Asia. We've had meeting after meeting, and we've had the broad consensus issue that you just brought up. But anything concrete? Do you see any steps out there except for certain communiques issued after the end of these meetings? Do you believe that this G20 meeting, all eyes on it, is simply going to be another one of these tens of meetings that we've had since November 15th of last year?
No, because I think the difference is the new leadership in Washington. The Obama administration is not hostile to the concepts of regulation and government intervention in the marketplace. By no means are they socialists, but they are clearly more inclined than the Bush administration was to use government resources and government oversight to intervene into the marketplace. And I think that there is more in common with some of the goals and ideals of the Obama administration than with a lot of the countries in Europe and in Latin America and elsewhere. So I do think that we are going to see more progress on some of these agreements to shore up the international financial system.